Hi, Adrian here, and today's episode dives into a storm brewing at Tesla. Bold promises have been made around the Cybertruck, but these are clashing with real-world problems, and Elon Musk's headline-grabbing feud with Donald Trump is making investors nervous and costing a lot of money. We'll explore what's really going wrong with Tesla's most hyped vehicle, why Musk's personal controversies are spilling over into company performance, and how one of the most valuable auto brands in the world is suddenly on the back foot. So strap in. This isn't just about electric trucks. It's about ambition, accountability, and the fine line between vision and reality, and, importantly, about getting reliability testing right. You're listening to China Manufacturing Decoded from the Sofeast Group. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Adrian hosting here. Andrew Amervin is joining me, and he's our reliability expert. And you've probably heard Andrew before, especially when we've been talking about reliability. And today, no different. We are talking about reliability, but we're talking about it in the context of the Tesla Cybertruck. Now, the Wall Street Journal on June the 7th published an interesting article by Becky Peterson about how the Cybertruck came to embody Tesla's problems. And believe you me, there's a lot of them, right? Now, can we talk a little bit about politics here? Sure, but the main message, and Andrew, I'm sure you'd agree, is that there are a number of reliability issues that even if you're not Tesla, you can still learn from if you are manufacturing products. Hi, Andrew. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be here, Adrian. Long time no see. How's it going?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm sitting here in the UK. The sun's out. We've got summer. It's very unusual to see that in the sky. Life is good.
Well, good to see, good to hear all that. Let me ask you, do you remember that big demo Musk had? I believe it was 2019 of when they just demoed Cybertruck, and one of his guys picked up a piece of I'm not sure if it was a rock, and he just a window. That window wasn't supposed to break, but it broke, it shattered. And then he said, "Let me try the rear window or side window," and that also shattered. And I know that they improved that. It's not they did that test again another time, but I remember that kind of stuck in my mind. And since then, I do remember at the time that we're talking about 250K per year forecast for that truck.
Yeah.
And it actually ended up being only 40K. And in fact, in 2025, it's been nothing but 7K up to now, which is way below 250K.
It's nothing. They at that sort of level, they've got to be losing money, right?
They've got to be, and I think this political situation didn't help it neither.
No. I mean, if you agree with Musk's politics, then you might think, well, I don't know why people have an issue with Tesla, but obviously a lot of people don't agree, and they have definitely boycotted it. Maybe, I'm not sure if it rallied in the States or not, but around Europe, the numbers of people buying Teslas have absolutely plummeted, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And then you might say, well, is that the real issue? Well, there were a lot of engineering issues too. I understand, reading and also looking through some other, research material. It looks like the engineering in Tesla was rushed to get this thing going and launch. And because of that, in order to keep the same schedule, well, you know what happens, right? When you rush to engineering, they cut corners on quality, they cut corners on reliability testing, and they also cut corners on manufacturing, So, and I think all of that kind of took a toll on, the quality of the overall product. So there were a lot of issues found, which actually they didn't know until 40,000 were shipped. And then
Mm.
all huge recalls on pretty much all of them. I don't know if you heard there were accelerator pedal recall. This is when it's a piece of the covering that is adhesive covering actually on the pedal. There was a piece of what you call some kind of a material that makes the pedal soft. This I don't understand if this is real or not. Supposedly there were some soap material used as a lubricant. I don't quite understand that. Engineers are pretty particular. They don't use soap for lubricant. So I don't know if that was some kind of a joke or some engineer was told, you know, had actually leaked this kind of information. I honestly I don't
Was
believe
it,
that.
it sounds like if that's what happened, because this bit of plastic came away and then it jammed the accelerator down with
Right.
obvious results of people probably having accidents and things like that, right? Obviously, we don't want the pedals in the car to be jammed. That's auto making 101, right? Dangerous,
Hello?
big safety issue. So it sounds to me like maybe somebody in the factory, maybe there was no guidance and they were like, well, we need to use this lubricant here. Here, I'll just grab this stuff I've got near me and I'll use it because nobody's actually accounted for this. Maybe something like that.
It could be possibly, but it's still very rare that
Mm,
engineers in Tesla they have very strict environment for engineers there, and I really doubt that they actually use uh, soap or some kind of material. But in any case, that was one serious issue that I found, and of course there was a windshield wiper issue as well.
mm,
These motors, I believe, were failing, and then the windshield would kind of stop right in front of your eyes, and visibility would be limited, so that's not
yeah.
good.
Yeah, because
um
these are large windscreens, right?
yeah,
And so they need a huge wiper and a big motor. And again, it's not normal technology, so I'm assuming this is something custom for Teslas.
correct. And then there was a cut rail. I believe this could be a very serious issue, but not as, I wouldn't say it was hazardous like windshield and the accelerator. I keep saying accelerometer for some reason. But another issue that I thought it was serious was the actual, the tire. Each tire has independent motors,
Hmm.
so the inverter was actually failing, and the motor basically would fail. That I don't know how that would translate into loss of maybe, control, because you think about it. You got four drives, four motors, and all of a sudden one of them just stops working. What would happen? Would you turn towards
Well,
that, kind of
well,
like a flat?
it would lock the wheel and affect the handling of the vehicle. So, yeah, that's
Right.
that's potentially dangerous, absolutely. And I think they recalled them for that. So again, a physical recall. Clearly, it's not a minor thing.
Yeah, so I think that those were my pick of
Mm.
serious and very deadly and or hazardous failures. There were other failures that, for example, misaligned doors, dashboard console falling off. Uh,
Exterior panels falling off.
yeah, did you see that the video? that that is outrageous. I mean, I really didn't expect that from Tesla. But
Mm.
I mean, all of this translates to huge financial cost and it on the brand. Some say that Musk lost 2 billion, especially after the political fall off.
Oh, I think it was more than that, Andrew, actually. Because recently he had that big falling out with Donald Trump, which now he's
Right.
kind of apologized for the tweets that he sent and deleted them. But we all know what he said. And I think Tesla lost hundreds of billions, like 150 billion of value on the stock market or something. I mean, when you're auto company starts losing that kind of money, it's no surprise that he stepped back from Doge or whatever it's called, and decided to focus more on the business because the business was failing. And you go from being one of the most prominent automakers in the world to being a failing one in just months. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a big effect. And that's not only the political thing, but this vehicle, Andrew, this was supposed to be kind of a flagship vehicle to show Tesla's innovation, to show that they can do something very, very different and use new techniques and new materials. Yet,
Right.
actually, I mean, looking at the reliability issues that you've spoken about, this isn't just, oh, the indicator sometimes stops working or something like that. I mean, we're talking about the vehicles are falling apart when people are driving them. These are hugely significant safety problems and reliability problems. So, you mentioned that it was rushed, right? I mean, going from prototype in 2019 to delivering in 2024, is it normal to get a car on the road in 4 years?
Well, it all depends. This kind of a product which is completely new, never been tested in the market.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's totally normal to take anywhere between 4 to 5 or 6 years, depending on the complexity of that design. So yeah, I think for Tesla, this was cutting edge, completely new product. Not they didn't copy anything except maybe the batteries were the same.
Hmm.
But anything else was completely new design. And I think that one of the things that I'm thinking that happened, aside from rushing the engineering, cutting corners and quality, but I think there were a lot of other mishaps probably along the line. For example, in a normal product development life cycle, the whole design and development is divided into 3 or 4 gate reviews, is what we call. I'm sure you've heard about like, you know, prototype stage and testing stage and then going to pre-production stage, right? So
Hmm.
divided into a quality assurance gate reviews where all teams gather in that meeting and they go through milestone reviews basically and they discuss what they have achieved in full in terms of 100% meeting the goals and what is not quite achieved, when they will achieve it, and how they need to adjust the schedule so that everything comes together at the end of the schedule. I think that they probably didn't do a good gate review. I think this is probably one of the fallouts because you really should not move to the next gate
Hmm.
until everything is done and completed. So this will be one of the problems. Again, it's just a guess. I'm not a Tesla employee, never
No.
worked there. I'm not exactly sure what happened, what went wrong. But these are some of the guesses that I think could have gone wrong. So a very well structured QA gate review schedule and monitoring of all the to-do lists and what needs to be completed is very, very important PM task, program
Hmm.
management task. And if that's has failed or somehow because the PM and engineering were forced to kind of sweep the mistakes or issues
Hmm.
under the rug and just move on, that that is a dangerous thing to do in engineering.
And
Absolutely.
you can well imagine Elon Musk potentially sitting there in his office, getting the results of this meeting and saying, "No, no, push on to the next step. We've got to push this forward." I don't
Exactly.
know. I don't know
As
for a
we,
fact. I don't know for a fact if that's what happened, but we know he's got form for this kind of thing, so it's quite possible.
yeah, and everyone knows that Elon is not a hardware engineer. So I mean, he's one of the sharpest guys I know. There's a lot of things that I respect, but he might have pushed the hardware engineering somewhat harder. And some of the engineers might have said, okay, well then, okay, let's keep going.
Mm,
So taking a big risk is not a good thing when it comes to engineers. Then the other thing that I was thinking it might have happened is suppliers. There was some of the materials, for example, seemed like rusting, the the adhesives that didn't work. There might have been supplier material issues. So that means that they should have done a really good supplier assessment and component and material assessment to kind of validate what they have asked for in terms of the life of those components, the quality and the functionality of those materials. They should have checked that. I mean,
mm,
you notice that some of those, like for example, contrail peeling, that 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 means that definitely that adhesive didn't work. And those adhesives, yeah, you wouldn't know if it would work or not unless you test it, because as you can see, after a year or two, they started peeling off. So it's a
yeah,
matter of temperature, humidity, sunshine, heat. All of that is going to affect the
mm,
glue and the materials.
right.
So yeah, I'm
Uh,
I'm thinking something went wrong in that area as well.
yeah, and this sort of accelerated testing, it's still going to take time, especially on an automobile, right? So,
Right.
and I know that they get them down into, Death Valley or somewhere and leave them for a period of time to see how the heat is affecting everything and things like that, for example, right? So let's
No, I
say
mean
that let's say
what you're
they're
saying.
rushing. Can you imagine that being skipped or rushed? Probably.
Yeah, probably. And I like the fact that you're saying Death Valley, but honestly, they have huge chambers that goes up to temperatures even hotter than Death Valley. Trust me.
Mm,
But what they must have missed was initial sample inspection and testing and validation of those samples when it comes
mm,
to material. There is such thing called production part approval process, which is basically you review and test and qualify those parts. Then they should have done periodic supplier audits, supplier scorecards, supplier reviews, and the material review. So all of these should have been done to the teeth in order to
mm,
have basically absolutely sure that there's not going to be any component and material issue. I think those are probably. Then of course we at Agilian, we always do design for manufacturability reviews, right? That is one important aspect of designing something, making sure that after you manufacture it, you're not going to have any reliability issues. And then, of course, we do full scale reliability tests before we go manufacturing to make sure the
mm,
design and materials and functionality, everything is going to meet the desired specifications. And I'm pretty sure they did all of these tests, but again, sometimes reliability test plan does not contain some of the critical tests. Like, for example, this could have happened for sure. The material tests and engineering tests are done way, way in early in the development. And as you go towards the end pre-production reliability tests, at that point, they don't do material tests anymore. They don't do engineering tests. They focus on product level tests. And so way early in the design, it's possible that they were rushed
mm.
and they didn't follow up with the suppliers on those material failures. And and supplier might have come up with some kind of a test results and some comments that sounded like, okay, all right, acceptable, good enough. But
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And
yeah.
this there and engineering is in rush and being pushed and pressed for time. So that can happen. But
I mean,
you yeah,
if this automobile was just a relatively small variation on one of his saloon cars that's been made before, maybe
right.
this kind of strategy would work better. But the Cybertruck is so different. It's such a custom vehicle that is unlike anything else on the road, really.
Yeah.
That that rushing and potentially skipping or not paying attention to these are, and let's face it, Andrew, these are unglamorous things, right? Elon Musk is all about going on that stage and saying, "Look at this crazy truck. You have not seen anything like this. We've used technology that no one else uses," and everyone is like, "Wow, how can he possibly bring this to market? That's amazing." But it's the unglamorous stuff in the background that gets it to market and helps it to actually perform and be reliable. And that's what we found lacking in this particular vehicle. But the lesson here, you might not be bringing a Cybertruck to market if you're listening, of course, right? But this is still going to affect your product as well if you glaze over or if you skip some of these important activities.
Absolutely. And I think that some of it goes to not having enough auto manufacturing experience. Like for Ford and some of the other, US manufacturers, they have learned a lot over years after screwing up so much that and they have copied a lot from each other. Toyota from Ford, Ford from Toyota, and they have learned that at the early stages of the development, it is crucial to make sure every single part is tested and validated from the suppliers. I don't know if I think you and I talked about that one part that pretty much every single auto manufacturer in the world was using, Toyota was using,
For
and
the airbags.
airbags. See, good the game. So that airbag, I forgot the name of the supplier, was providing that part pretty much for every auto manufacturer, and they all had issues.
Yeah.
All missed.
Yeah.
So
Millions of vehicles affected.
right, aliens were recalled and all fronts. But so I think that this is exactly what happened, or at least I'm guessing this is what happened. When they kind of were pressed for time and pressured for meeting the goals, and they basically skipped a lot of material testing. And when it came to reliability on the product level, they didn't. The focus on the product level is not focused on material level. So that means if there was a adhesive issue, you probably wouldn't catch it unless that product was going to be life tested. And life testing, you know what better than life testing in the field testing? It actually, the product being on the road, people are using it. So,
Yeah,
so that
that's all very well, but if I've paid over $100,000 for my vehicle,
right.
I'm not sure I want to be your beta tester. And then I don't know, I'm driving into city in the States, and then suddenly my door falls off or something.
Yeah, unfortunately, if they didn't do all of those material testing and life testing, that is the only other way. Because yeah, yeah, and it's not and this has happened many times with any other. Remember the Firestone tires
Yeah,
blowing
yeah,
up?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, there were some other, automakers that had some serious issues, and tons of people died
yeah.
until they food, and after 10 years they stopped it. So these things are very common in the industry, but I really think that the field testing wasn't done enough or
Mm,
adequate so that they could catch issues. For example, they spent too much little time on field tests, but more aggressive on
mm.
let's get this product launched. You know,
Absolutely,
at,
absolutely.
at it got a lot of issues. There's another thing that trust and transparency, on repairs and warranties. So a lot of these issues were happening in the field, but somehow there were no transparency. They didn't share those issues with the public, I suppose,
Mm,
because if they did, a lot of people would come in short time, not after 40,000 were shipped.
mm.
If they friendship from all over the US and whoever, all the dealers, then they would say, hey, wait a minute, something is happening. So instead of 40,000 being shipped, maybe 10,000 would be shipped, and we would know immediately what's going on, and then get an action going on and fix those issues early. So that could be another problem. I don't know exactly what we're on, but all in all, I think that generally speaking, the product development lifecycle was not followed to the teeth.
Mm, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you have to think about it this way: making an auto, a car, is not making a mobile phone or some kind of consumer product, because a person's life is riding on it, and if you don't do enough tests, and you mentioned something about, does it really take 4 years, 5 years? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
spends a lot more than that on prototype cars. They spend probably 2 to 3 years just on the concept alone, and then they spend another 5 to 10 years on the real
Yeah.
car.
And the more innovative the vehicle is, the longer it's probably going to take to bring to market, because and this particular vehicle is extremely innovative for many, many reasons, good or bad, but still it uses materials and technology that others just simply don't. So is it realistic that it only took 4 years? Maybe it needed to take longer, as you're saying.
Yeah, I really think they should have spent some more time on.
Hmm.
So if I had to summarize, honestly, I
Okay.
would say uh, they should have reinforced the QA gate reviews. They should have put more emphasis on that, making sure that all the issues are done and all the accomplishments and goals are completed before moving on to the next gate.
Hmm.
So that could be, because if that was done right at every gate, they would have found some issues. Reliability guys would say, "Oh, no, no, we can't go, move on, because we have this one supplier material. Glue is not good. So
Hmm.
you find another glue and then retest it. You can't really move on. Of course, on the background, design and engineering development still keep going on. Okay, so that nothing really stops on that side, but you can't really move on to officially to the next gate until all open goals are all accomplished and
Yeah.
done. Then you can say, okay, they were done in this date. From here on is all gate number two, so
Hmm.
on. So I think that was one important area that probably there was some shortcomings. And then of course suppliers and materials monitoring and making sure there are standardized parts and they're all verified and tested and confirmed that exactly meeting the specification as designed or as expected. And if there were slightest nonconformancies on that area, should have been flagged and should have stopped that supplier from providing those parts, because apparently those glues didn't work at all. That's just not, there's certain kind of standard automotive glue and automotive parts that is just absolutely different materials and different parts than
Hmm.
any consumer products. Yeah. Because we're talking about a reliability of like 10 years minimum,
Yeah.
you know? So something that must last at least 10 years. This is
Hmm.
not a consumer product. And I think that it's possible that Musk and team might have, you know, it's hard to say that they missed on that area. I'm sure they didn't. They have a lot of very, very smart, talented people on that team. But you never know. It takes one guy to mess
Hmm.
up within the
And,
team.
and you put people under pressure for time, and these things can happen. And
It-
it's not only
yeah,
been Tesla, we've seen it in his other companies as well, where, you know, it was that famous quote from Mark Zuckerberg. I think he said, move fast and break things. And I think that is how Musk operates as well. And that's fine. And I think your assessment of the situation is absolutely bang on. But
Right.
I just wonder, how forgiving are people going to be if you spend $100,000+ on your new Cybertruck and the thing gets recalled 4 times, your panels fall off, you have a lot of updates that have to come through over the air as well, you can't drive it, that it starts
Right.
rusting, are you going to think, wow, that was a good value vehicle? $100,000 or more, that's a lot of money.
So if you want to invest $100,000, I think you're going to be looking at the product reviews and customer reviews, don't you? And so
And they're
as
not good.
right, not good, right? So people are going to be talking about and showing videos and pictures of things
Mm.
falling apart. That scare you as a customer. You'll be like, no, I think I'll pass.
Yeah, I think so. And we've
Notice.
actually seen the prices of these falling
Yeah,
now, and that's, obviously due to lack of demand and and I think he's bought out like lower cost versions and things like that to see if they
right.
can try and spur some sales. I
But
guess now that he's moved away from politics and is more focused on running his businesses, maybe we'll see things stabilize, and maybe some of the issues that you've highlighted they will work on and try to get right. No doubt, because it's common sense. They can't just keep things going the way that they were. So, yeah, good learning experience there for listeners, though, because it's not just the Teslas of this world that can suffer from this issue. Rushing into production, especially at the cost of reliability testing and really validating whether your product is going to perform in the field in the long term for your customers is just so critical. We've said it before and we're saying it again.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, if you were spending 100,000 on a product, I doubt that you would even buy it cheaper because the resale value would be gone.
Mm,
Nobody buy it back from you,
no.
even if you wanted to sell it at 50,000 later on.
That's even worse. Does anybody want to
Right.
buy my second-hand Cybertruck? No, thanks.
Exactly. So that's the scary part. So
Yeah.
honestly, I don't have any hopes for that truck
Mm.
unless I can completely redesign it and reshape it
Yeah.
so that people would
Well,
actually.
I'll throw it out to American listeners because I know we have a lot of listeners from the States. Do any of you guys have a Cybertruck? What has been your experience of the truck? Do you love it? Do you regret buying it? We'd love to know. That'd be really interesting. But yeah, a weird vehicle definitely showcases innovation, but does it really end up just being another white elephant? The answer
Right.
to that, Andrew, is maybe.
So I just wanted to make sure that when it comes to reliability testing, design for manufacturability, I think they may have missed a lot in that, or shortcuts in that area. That might have been because if they were running a full product reliability and full life test, there's a possibility that they might have caught some of these.
Yeah.
Although you and I know, when trying to launch the product, they might have said, well, it'll take 2 years for this glue to peel off. So let's just buy some time and work on that right now. So there's a
Mhm.
possibility that might have happened too.
Mm,
But that's what I'm thinking.
yeah. No, I think you're right. Great. So interesting look at quite a famous product and famous situation of the right now in the context of reliability. Andrew, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review, and share because it will really help others discover us too.